It seems now, from a contemporary perspective, that art and Renaissance Florence are inseparable. This wasn't always the case, however, with many of the great artists considered no different from ordinary craftsmen. It was only when an artistic revolution swept the streets of Florence that art was perceived in a new and intellectual light. As a result, art was seen as a practice embodying geometry, considered to be imbued with intellectual properties, and holding a divine power. The revolution totally reconfigured the style of art, which deviated from the supernatural qualities of medieval art and embraced elements of anatomy, botany, science, and naturalism during the Renaissance. Central to the artistic revolution was the practice of patronage, the financial means to the artist's end. Considering the wealth of the patronizers, the style of art produced was no doubt extraordinary. It was a style that was visually beautiful, yet also complex in the personal, political, and religious agendas that were imbued into the artwork. For the patronizers, art represented social status. It functioned as religious devotion and piety, and served as a method to commemorate family heritage. So then, one must ask, which agenda was prioritized among the patronizers? Or could numerous agendas be interwoven into one piece of art? These questions can be answered by considering the impact of a certain family, whose status, wealth, and influence redefine the rules of the patronage game. In order to analyse patronage, it is therefore essential to look closely at the infamous Medici family. So how did the Medici set the tone for patronage across Florence? Firstly, it was through the concept of magnificence, a virtue that legitimized and naturalized the patronage of architecture. As a virtue of piety and religious devotion, magnificence masked the personal and political agendas of religious patronage. Magnificence undermined negative perceptions towards the Medici patronage, even giving Lorenzo his title as Lorenzo the Magnificent. This virtue paved the way for patronage that was more individualized and personal, as personal agendas came to coexist with pious or civic intentions. Medici patronage of religious institutions also communicated the family's strength, power, and status in Florence, something that encouraged other patronizers to align themselves with the Medici family. Magnificence prompted patronizers like Gaspare da Lama to commission art that displayed connections with the Medici, only intensifying the power of this family. The more personal patronage of the Medici family continued in the form of the Ospedale degli Innocenti, the Hospital of the Innocents. Cosimo de' Medici II is immortalized within the frescoes, whilst artist Domenico Ghirlandaio incorporated a self-portrait within the biblical story, the Adoration of the Shepherds. So overt and explicit are these gestures of patronage, ensuring that the Medici name is remembered for its contribution to the hospital and to the city of Florence. Tracing the impact of the Medici can also be seen through other wealthy patronizers who continue the tradition of injecting art with personal agendas. Overrun with family crests, personal imagery, and symbols, religious architecture clearly demonstrates the influence of the Medici in shaping the practice of patronage. However, only those in good graces with the Medici could incorporate personal imagery, so as not to upset the balance of power. The Filippo Strozzi chapel, painted by Filippino Lippi, closely references the name of the patronizer by incorporating the story of Saint Philip. The Pazzi chapel in Santa Croce incorporates the Pazzi family coat of arms. Even more overt is the patronage of Giovanni Rucellai, whose name is literally written on the facade of the Santa Maria Novella. In the cutthroat world of Renaissance patronage, how did the actual artists fit in? Well, what existed was a symbiotic relationship between the patronizers and artists, one that helped to elevate the status of the artist from craftsman to esteemed, respected individual. Subsequently, artists like Ghiberti, Brunelleschi, and Donatello were considered heroes, and the Academy was founded by Vasari to unite and oversee art production in Florence. For some, art patronage even meant citywide fame. This is true of Brunelleschi, who forged connections with powerful individuals like Giovanni de' Medici, Tommaso Barbado, and Sciatta Ridolfi. As his status grew, so did his ambitions, with Brunelleschi demonstrating his ingenuity through the creation of chapel domes. Without the fiscal support and empowered status granted by Florence's patronizers, it is uncertain whether the talent of artists such as Brunelleschi would have flourished in the same way. Patronage was important for so many reasons, as it granted artists like Brunelleschi with the opportunity to design, invent, and practice like never before. Artists were able to leave their mark on Florentine society, celebrated nearly 150 years later by Giorgio Vasari's The Lives of the Most Excellent Painters, Sculptors and Architects. This book, in a way, does for the artists what they did for the patronizers. It celebrates and documents their contribution to Florentine society, reflecting on Ghiberti's work as combining design, diligence, invention and art. Vasari preserved the newfound intellectual status of the artists within the Renaissance. In Renaissance Florence, patronage was complex, full of agendas, and empowered both artists and patronizer alike. Patronage meant the preservation of the great artists. It meant the expression of piety and religious devotion, the betterment of the city of Florence, and the expression of family status. So many agendas and discourses are hidden within the art and architecture of Florence, as the mark of both artist and patronizer can still be seen today.